I'm just going to go ahead and sit here with my character screen open and my cursor hovering over a particular icon just for a few more seconds, basically so that I can set up this punchline here. Let me know down in the comments if you found both of the things that I'm referring to. To go ahead and just bite the style, one of my favorite content creators right now is Zevi. You gotta see, Diablo 4 had a problem. And no, it isn't this cast of developers here. I love all of these people. These people are fantastic. No, it was with the Spiritborn class and the fact that it's been overperforming into the quintillions of damage due to an overlapping, just absolute smorgasbord of bugs. But the problem isn't with those bugs. You can fix a bug. But it's with how the Diablo 4 developers have approached these bugs in Season 6. And I'll just go ahead and let them speak for themselves.
Most definitely. And I know with this mid-season update, of course, the biggest topic that we've been hearing a lot is around class balance, specifically around like Spiritborn right now and how it is performing very well compared to some of the other classes. And so
yeah, so kind of the state of the game, you know, the Spiritborn is performing quite a bit better than other classes, which we want to dig deep, you know, do a little bit of a deep dive into how and why and how we think about it. Largely, a big culprit of this is actually due to unintended interactions that the class has with how some things scale and other issues. Even if you know something that might be unintended, but it's really, really good and crazy, and you spend 40 plus 100 hours, whatever, making it, and if we kind of pull the rug out from under you, it's worrisome to do that to players. I think in the middle of a season.
It's all about respecting your time, right?
Yeah. So in that vein, we are not planning to nerf the Spiritborn in the mid-season patch, which I think is the thing that's on everybody's mind. Like, is Blizzard going to do it? And we've decided that we think it's best for the game to not do it in the mid-season.
Now, okay, great. We're not going to nerf the Spiritborn because a lot of people spend time and effort putting together builds and playing into things. And it's not the player's fault that the Spiritborn was released in this bugged state. Right? I shouldn't have my character just absolutely ruined because it turns out the power that I was getting was from bugs. Now, not everybody necessarily agrees with that approach, but I'd like to remind everybody that it's quite literally what we made them promise to us. The last time that there was an overperforming build that got nerfed into the ground very early on in the development cycle of the game. Now, how does that pertain to what you're looking at right now? For people who aren't quite aware of what the Bloodlance Necromancer is currently able to accomplish, tier 110 is up near the upper echelon of what about 80 to 90% perfect gear will get you. And at the time of this recording, as far as my knowledge is concerned, we've only seen a tier 113 clear on the Bloodlance Necro. But you might notice something different between this and any of the other most recent videos that I've shown you where I've been clearing pit content. Look at the speed at which I'm clearing through the packs of monsters. Look at the fact that I'm not pulling together 3+ screens worth of monsters to fight them. Oh, and look at the fact that every once in a while you're seeing triple-digit billions of damage against these targets. That's not really normal. That's not what you should expect to be able to do on this class. And just speeding up to the end of the boss fight here, we also don't expect to be clearing the boss of a tier 110 pit on the Necromancer class in under 6 minutes. This is fairly unheard of. The other really important context for this was I wasn't playing Bloodlance as early as this morning. I was actually on my Blight Necromancer, and when I came to understand the 2 bugs I'm about to detail for you, I immediately put together whatever gear I had left over. I very quickly masterworked a couple pieces of gear, and then I just ran a single pit to see whether or not 1, this was actually impacting my damage output, and 2, if I could replicate them. Well, it turns out it's fairly easy. It's just as easy as taking your helmet off and putting it back on and drinking a potion that we all thought was fixed at this point. Y'all remember Antivenin? Antivenin was a potion that used to already have a bugged interaction. You received this from doing a quest. I'm not going to spell it out for you. You can go ahead and Google it yourself. Oddly enough, I'm not telling everybody to go do these exploits. The developers are aware of them already before you make this video, so don't try to lynch me down in the comments. I just want to give you an idea if you might start seeing some pretty wild output and you start seeing things reported on Reddit. But you see, the elixir of Antivenin had a problem. Wow, back-to-back Sephi references is actually kind of wild. Before this season, you could actually drink Antivenin along with another elixir. For whatever reason, this quest elixir doesn't overwrite your previous one, or at least it didn't in the past. But nowadays it does. So gaining the additional 15% maximum life on top of a normal 20% maximum life was already very powerful, especially for overpower builds in the past, but they fixed it so you can't have both of these up simultaneously. Now let me go ahead and drink a 20% maximum life potion. and you might have noticed a pretty distinct reduction in my overall survivability. Now, that being said, 34,000 maximum life is still pretty bananas wild, but drinking Antivenin is having some effects on your character. Now, if you weren't aware, things like Spirit Wave, which has the Blood Artisan's Curse, which directly scales off of how much maximum life you have in comparison to your minimum life, as well as overpower damage, this amount of maximum life, where I'm actually getting over 1 million when I've procced my rune word, is giving me a pretty big amount of damage multiplication. Now, for people who don't know, when you overpower, you get a 50% damage multiplier. You activate anything that says when you overpower, but on top of that, you gain an insane amount of additive damage, and that's why basically every single build right now is an overpower build. And it's actually why I made this video right here, where I discuss the overpower singularity, where I compare balance in Magic the Gathering versus Diablo 4. I'm pretty proud of that video. I'll go ahead and link it in case you wanted to check it out. But there's a reason why everybody is going for orange numbers whenever they can. Do you remember orange Spiritborn build? People were referring to Sever as the orange Sever build, etc. Turns out overpower is very strong. And there's a reason why. It gives you additive damage based off of how much more maximum life you have than your base life. At level 60, you have 400 base life, and my character has a whopping 1 million maximum life. Now, we also gain additive damage based off of our fortify, and we're able to fortify up to our maximum life. So what does the damage bonus look like when you do all of the math? Well, it's fairly simple. The total equation becomes your maximum life minus your base life. That's how you figure out how much additive damage you're getting from your maximum life. And then you actually get even more of that from your fortify value. So your fortify value is just straight up your maximum life divided by your base life. Now, 4,999. That's not a lot. 5,000 overpower damage, that's a lot. No. That is 4,999 percentages above your base life that you are. So to figure out how much additive damage you're getting from this, you actually take this bad thing and you multiply it by 100. So that's how much additive damage we're getting just from this, just on our overpower, ignoring everything else on our character, ignoring the thousands upon thousands of overpower and additive damage that we get from Paragon, ignoring blood overpower damage on our gear, etc. That's a lot. And I'll go ahead and let you know, that might be a little bit too much. But it goes even further. We're actually getting a significantly larger overall boost in our damage than even just this, because there was a second icon that I was indicating on my buff bar here. Damage empowered by Lilith. You'll notice that has a 2 next to it. Well, how did I go about doing that? There is a known exploit currently in the game that's tied to the Heir of Perdition. The way of Heir of Perdition works is that if you're just equipping it yourself and you're going about your day, you gain 60% damage bonus. That's why it's basically recommended on every single build that can wear it, even those that don't care about critting or lucky hit chance at all. Hell, even ones that aren't even using a core skill. Because it turns out that 60% damage is very strong. Now, the known exploit that gets abused in a lot of different situations is how this interacts with party members. If you go into a party and all 4 people are wearing an Heir of Perdition, and then you kill a monster, you steal all of their buffs. So rather than having a 60% damage bonus, you have a 240% damage bonus. So your helmet is more than tripling your overall damage output. Now, you're playing solo, and you'll notice I only had a 2 on my bar. Did I go and steal a buff from a single person? No, I just went ahead and swapped world tier difficulty. Now that I've reset my character, you'll see that I have my Heir of Perdition on, and I have damage empowered by Lilith, and now I'm just going to go to a different world tier. And now I just have 2. It doesn't go any higher than this, but for whatever reason, it maintains the buffs that you had previously. That makes sense. And then I believe it attempts to reload your gear when you swap between world tiers, because you have to move into ostensibly a different server. You know, it has to maintain all these things on your character. So yeah, now I just have this permanent 120% damage bonus. And the problem with that is that people have probably been doing this all the time and not even necessarily knowing that it's happening, because you quite literally don't have to do anything to activate it. You just have to swap world tiers. Did you go to trade with somebody and they were in a different world tier? So you joined their instance, bought a thing from them, and you bumped up? Well, hey, you now have been enjoying this buff again until you die or until you log out. But at the start of this video, I said that the Diablo 4 devs had a problem. What is that problem? Well, if you remember, they just said that because the Spiritborn is being enjoyed by a lot of people have invested a lot of time and energy into their characters, and the fact that because there's no real competition in the game, it's not like there are leaderboards that are being abused here, no one is being negatively impacted directly by the Spiritborn continuing to be powerful. So rather than pull the rug out from underneath them, they're not going to address these bugs. Now, what about these two? Now, sure, for the Antivenin, you have to slightly go out of your way. You have to go complete a quest. You have to unlock the ability to make this thing. But Antivenin itself is just like a fairly good buff. Now, fixing the Antivenin, I think, is completely fair. This thing is not meant to be doing this. This is ridiculous. Not only that, it's exacerbating the issue with the Spiritborn. Right, the Spiritborn has a bunch of things that scale off of maximum life and barrier, and being able to generate this much maximum life then causes you to generate a lot more barrier. While the damage numbers that you saw in my pit run are really impressive for the Necromancer themselves, especially on Bloodlance, they pale in comparison to anything that the Spiritborn's been doing. Again, quintillions upon quintillions of damage. They're going to hit overflow bugs almost certainly and go into the negatives and wrap all the way around to doing 1 damage again. I'm almost certain that that's going to happen. What about Air of Perdition in this little bug that you kind of can't choose not to interact with unless you literally refuse to leave your world tier? Before I tell you my opinion, because I'm going to have a fairly strong opinion, I think it's really stupid for me to make a video and then not have an opinion, just leave it up all wishy-washy like this. I'd love to hear from you down in the comments. 1, what do you think my opinion is going to be? And if you watch my most recent live stream, I think you're going to have a pretty good idea. And 2, is this the type of stuff that you both want to see in the game, even if it's just for a season? Should it get fixed immediately? Sound off down below. I think that we can have a lot of very interesting conversations here, because I don't think it's so cut and dry. Alrighty, did you do that? Did you go ahead? You left a comment? Great. Oh, also real quick, if you're new here, subscribe to the channel. If you learned something here today, or if you appreciate me breaking this down for you, you don't want to miss out on things like this. But on top of that, leave a like on the video too. Okay, great. I'll stop dragging you along. They absolutely, no question, need to solve both of these issues. And here's why. While there aren't official leaderboards, while nobody is negatively impacted by this, there are unofficial leaderboards for pit pushing. They're maintained here on helltides.com. In addition to that, Macroll has actually had pit leaderboard ladders multiple seasons in a row, where people have won rewards for being able to push. And each one of these have specific rules for how you need to be able to apply to them, etc. So while there's no official competition, there is unofficial competition. Not only that, the community prides itself and participates a lot in this pushing of the envelope, the innovation of builds, the proving what is the most optimal, what is the best. While this is not important to 99.9% of the player base, there are a ton of people who do find this fairly important. And while the Spiritborn has gone to enjoy its 2-minute clears of pit tier 150, at least that is insular to the Spiritborn. We all know that the Spiritborn is doing janky stuff. But it's the other classes that are actually all pretty fair across the board. Like, yeah, rest in peace to the poor Druid over here, only at 112. But a difference of 4 pit tiers between the majority of the classes in the game speaks to an incredibly good and wholesome and organic amount of balance that exists in the game. Now, each one of these clears is not made equal. I would say that the Necromancer, while not necessarily the slowest amongst the bunch or the lowest amongst the bunch, has to claw and drag its way through these clears. But that's a topic for another video. But these 2 things here, where your character hasn't invested in them, you haven't built into them, you haven't spent hundreds of hours trying to get the gear to do them, this is quite literally just a side quest that you do to get up to 1,000,000 life here, just need to be fixed. They need to be fixed as soon as possible. And while I think that some people might point to Blizzard and try to point out a hypocrisy here, they're really a false equivalency. There is an incredibly wild difference between somebody spending hundreds of billions of gold as well as hundreds of hours perfecting their Spiritborn, only to have that completely wrecked because for whatever reason there were bugs at the launch of the season, versus people finding out that if you drink this potion, you quintuple your overpower damage. They're just not the same. But I think that the topic of this conversation is incredibly important, because something that I was engaging with a lot yesterday when the patch went live was a lot of people kind of on the other side of the fence, saying, 1, the Spiritborn needed to be nerfed. They thought that they were going to be buffing all the other classes up to the Spiritborn, that everybody was going to be speedrunning tier 150. And because that didn't happen, The developers had failed, had lied to us, had scammed us, had stolen from us, had failed to deliver on promises, when in reality they are quite literally acting on the promises that we had already made them commit to us the last time that they just ruined a class's fun because it was overperforming. But again, sound off down in the comments if now, after hearing my opinion, it's either changed yours or you'd like to engage in this conversation further. Again, subscribe to the channel if you're brand new here, leave a like on the video if you appreciated it, and even if you don't, there's no rules, only right, click the button anyways, it's free and it helps me out a ton. But as always, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that it helped somebody somewhere. And as always, I look forward to seeing you in the next one.